What's up? This is Kevin Dana of the Santa Cruz Warriors, and you're rocking with my guy Tanner Oda on the Krossed Over podcast.
We have our national champions. It's UConn on the women's side and Florida on the men's side. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Krossed Over podcast. Thank you for tuning in wherever you're listening. And you know what? Let's just get right into the show. First, let's talk about the women's final where UConn crushed South Carolina 82-59. And in the first half, UConn up 10 at halftime. I was thinking, wow, they're in control of this game, but South Carolina can come back as they've, came back many times this year on separate occasions. But UConn made sure that they didn't, and it actually went the other way around where UConn did not slow down, and actually they really put their foot on the gas pedal and just accelerated to the finish. Like, they really, really built an even bigger lead. Instead of South Carolina coming back, UConn put the game away, pretty much. And I think at a few points in this game, UConn was up around 38 points. Their final score, like I said, 82-59. And it's kind of deja vu from when back in February, UConn also destroyed South Carolina, but that was in Columbia, South Carolina. And I was just thinking, well, UConn is still very, same team, obviously. But South Carolina isn't going to get crushed. It's the national championship game. It's a month and a half later. No, UConn said, let's just do the same thing, right? We've beaten this team before by a lot. Why not do it again? And that's exactly what they did. And UConn just looked like they had more energy. Looks like they wanted it more from the opening tip. And they take care of this one pretty easily. They were led by Sarah Strong, who had a double-double. She had a really, really good game. And then just really everybody on UConn contributed to this win. It was a dominant win. Where you pretty much knew the game was over, I would say probably at the end of the third quarter. Maybe even before. It was such a dominant game from UConn. It's really hard to describe because it's just so shocking to me. South Carolina is the defending champion. You would think that they would want revenge on UConn from getting crushed early in the year, and then they get crushed again. This is not something I was expecting, especially with South Carolina playing well in the tournament, especially, when they dominated Texas to get here in the Final Four game. And then they really just did not look like they had much energy, South Carolina. It really did. They looked a little flat mentally throughout the game. And you could just tell that UConn had all the momentum, all the energy. They wanted it more pretty much the entire game, even when they were up 10 at halftime. And it says a lot about UConn's character. That's probably the main takeaway. And they come out as national champions on the women's side of the bracket. Very impressive performance. UConn gets their revenge on South Carolina because even though UConn beat them early in the year, 2022, we flash back 3 years, South Carolina beat UConn in the final. So, UConn wins their first national championship since 2016, a quote-unquote 9-year drought. Obviously, for most programs, that's not really a drought, but for UConn, of course, it is. And Paige Beckers goes to the WNBA draft, where she's probably going to be picked number 1 as a national champion. Great ending for her. And on that note, let's move on to the men's national championship game. What a game this was. It was not like the UConn-South Carolina game. It was a lot closer. A lot closer. 65-63, Florida takes down Houston. And I know I said Houston would win this game, or at least I thought so. But I knew this game would be very, very close, and it was. Wow, there is just so many things to be said about this game. Houston basically having control the entire way through, even building a double-digit lead earlier in the second half. Florida climbs back, but even then it's like Houston has control of this game. Houston looks like they're going to win this game. And I wouldn't say Florida wasn't playing well. They still played very, very well, but it wasn't like their performance against Auburn or their performance against Texas Tech. It was a little bit different. You felt, if you're Florida, you felt a little bit nervous, I feel like. Of course, it's national championship. Of course, you're going to feel a little bit more nervous. But I just don't think it was flowing as well for Florida throughout the entire game until that stretch at the end. Florida is just such a clutch team. And so is Houston, don't get me wrong. But man, throughout this tournament, against UConn, against Texas Tech, against basically every game except for the first round up until this point, they played in clutch games the entire way through. So it's just like, it feels right for them to win. They won the SEC tournament. Then they come in, of course, they destroyed Norfolk State. Second round, barely beat UConn, the national champion for 2 years in a row coming into this tournament. They take care of Maryland, so maybe, okay, Sweet 16, not very close of a game. However, Texas Tech, they were down 10 with 4 minutes left, and then Walter Clayton Jr. just decides to go on a tear, scores more than Texas Tech does down the stretch, and then they move on to the Final Four. Then they take care of Auburn in another clutch game, and then in the most important game in the season, they come back and take down Houston. Just amazing from Florida. Just so much to be said about this game. You could go on for so long just talking about this one game. It was an insanely entertaining national championship game. And I want to give props to Houston. They fought through the entire game. They really controlled this almost the entire game. But Florida's clutches, man, came up down the stretch. It came huge. And I think those early tests in the tournament, or the tests throughout the tournament, against UConn, against Texas Tech, against Auburn, I think it prepared Florida for this situation. And I'm not saying Houston wasn't prepared. They had close wins against Purdue in the Sweet 16. They had an incredible comeback against Duke in the Final Four. But Florida just looked more prepared down the stretch. They just looked more composed. Looked like, they really felt like they had it. Florida did. And I think Houston maybe got a little bit nervous down the stretch because Florida was playing behind the whole game, right? Houston had the lead pretty much the whole game. So when Florida really felt like they had it, I think they took it and they just never really got it back. Houston really, they went cold down the stretch. Like, they couldn't really make a shot. Houston couldn't make a shot. And Florida was just on fire down the stretch. And that's just how basketball games go, especially in the national championship, especially in March Madness. Who's the hot team down the stretch? Who has control of the game? And Florida clearly had control of the game. So congrats to Florida for winning the national championship. Houston, nothing to be ashamed of. It was a fantastic season. It's just really tough because you were right there and just couldn't get the job done. And Houston was looking for their first national championship. Florida, this is their third. The last time Florida won was in 2007 and 2006. They were second team in history. Second latest team in history to go back-to-back. UConn did it in 23 and 24. Florida did it in 06 and 07, which with this 2025 win, this becomes their third national championship win. Florida, I don't know if you guys saw the video, in their home basketball stadium, the fans were going crazy. That place was packed, of course. This was huge for Florida and the SEC, who had a fantastic season this year. 14 teams getting into the tournament, which is, a little debatable, but, they were definitely the best conference this year, and Florida is your national champion, and it's pretty sad that college basketball is coming to an end now, and that we'll have to wait until about November until it starts up again, but, what a game to end the season, which has been a fantastic and entertaining season, and Florida comes out on top, and I did want to mention real quick, let's go back to the women's side real quick. So, I know I mentioned that Florida took down UConn and on the men's side of the bracket, and UConn won the 2023 and 2024 national championships. So, their men's team doesn't win 3 in a row, which is insanely hard to do. But their women's team wins in 2025. So, it's like, if you're a UConn Huskies fan, my goodness, what a time for your programs right now, your men's and women's programs. And you're a little spoiled if you're a UConn Huskies fan. UConn Husky fan right now. You get a 2023 men's championship win, then a 2024 men's championship win, and then the 1 year your men's team doesn't win, your women's team wins. So, I mean, sure, that's 3 years in a row that either the UConn men's team wins or the women's team wins, which is insane to me. It's insane to think about. 3 years in a row, a Husky fan has a national championship that they can celebrate. Wow. fascinating to me. I'm a Stanford fan. I just want us to make March Madness. Our women's team won in 2021, which is great. But our men's team hasn't, made it to since 2014. And here's UConn celebrating 3 national championships year after year after year. Oh my goodness. It's just what a program UConn basketball has on both their sides. It's insane. Okay, that is going to do it for today's episode of the Crossover Podcast. Thank you everybody for tuning in, and I will see you next time.